So what exactly is going on with the issue of former Governor Yahaya Bello of Kogi State? That is the first conversation we'll have. We're meant to have one of the officials of the state government, but we hope he's going to join us at some point. We're now being joined on the program by a senior advocate of Nigeria because the legalese is a lot. So we needed a learned mind to help us lay people to understand what's going on. Mr. Kayode Adelola is a senior advocate of Nigeria. He joins us via Zoom. Mr. Adelola, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you very much for having me again.
The natural question, like I always like to say, is maybe you help us interpret what the law sees at what is playing out at the residence of former Governor Yahaya Bello. We understand that the issues vary in forms. It dates back to 2015, where there was an allegation of misappropriation of fund or transfer of fund for personal use to the tune of over 80 billion naira, and it's supposed to be arraigned tomorrow. So there's a gamut of issues around this particular situation. But let's begin with some of the basics of what we are seeing play out so that we don't get to the court to do the job of the court. How does the law see what's playing out between the EFCC and Yahaya Bello at his residence in Abuja?
Well, the EFCC as a body has this method of carrying out its activities as provided by the law. Now they have gone to the home of a former governor. Well, it's not so much the fact that he's a former governor, but of a citizen of Nigeria, and they have laid siege at his residence. The man is asking the court to say that these people have no right to infringe his human rights in all ramifications. He went to the High Court in Lokoja, seeking an order of that court to restrain the EFCC from detaining or prosecuting him. Fundamentally, one would say that Mr. Yahaya Bello has fundamental human rights that ought to be protected. The High Court of a state has the jurisdiction to take matters relating to fundamental human rights. And ordinarily, when you determine whether a court has jurisdiction or not, what you look at is a statement of claim filed by the claimant who has approached the court. The EFCC on its own part feels that it has a responsibility under the law to apprehend a man who has committed a financial crime. And I'm sure they were only waiting at his residence in anticipation of a court order allowing them to apprehend the gentleman. Well, the question then that arises again is, can a high court, a state high court, determine a matter involving the federal government or its agencies? That's, I think, is the crux of the matter here. Even though the EFCC, from what I have read, challenged the jurisdiction of the state high court, the learned judge presiding stated that that challenge of this jurisdiction failed, and as such, he was dismissing it. With greatest respect to the judge, I'm unable to agree. And I think where the agency of the federal government appears before a court, it has to be the federal high court. And I'm referring to section 251 of the Constitution, subsection 1, and it has paragraphs P, Q, and R, which states that where the federal government or its agencies and the administration thereto of those bodies of the management come before the court, they must go before the federal high court. To that extent, I think the state high court didn't have the requisite jurisdiction to hear that matter. Besides that, the judge of the state high court was clever by saying that the EFCC shouldn't prosecute or detain Mr. Yahaya Bello until they have had diligent inquiries and they have made a proper case against him before they can prosecute him. Well, who determines that? Until when a case is presented before the court, you cannot determine if there has been proper investigation, and the matter is fit for trial. So to that extent, the EFCC has gone before a federal high court, which is the appropriate venue, to get an order to detain Mr. Yahaya Bello. And to that extent, I think it will be very well within their rights to approach the court tomorrow for prosecution of the former governor.
I want to read something that your colleague Leonard Sek wrote, which kind of agree with what you're saying, but I need your thoughts on it, Mr. Femi Falana. It says the allegation made by the ex-governor that EFCC has disobeyed a court order by attempting to arrest him to answer to the charge of 84 billion naira theft is legally untenable. As a former governor, Mr. Yahaya Bello has lost his immunity from arrest and prosecution. No court can confer a life immunity on a former governor in Nigeria. I needed you to speak to that.
I couldn't have put it in a better way. The truth is, once a former governor steps down from his office, he becomes an ordinary citizen. And that's why when a man occupies the seat of governor, he must be careful. He would have immunity for as long as he retains his seat, but that can be only for a time and a season. And as soon as he steps down as governor, and we have seen it happen, we sent the governor, was it Plateau State, who was prosecuted and sent to prison, and these things will continue. We need to sanitize our politics. It's not only about the politics, but the society needs to have some sanity. People shouldn't take public funds and say, well, we must give the ex-governor benefit of doubt. Maybe he will have a defense for the use of the funds, but until then, he has a duty to face the law, and he must go before a court. So my learned colleague has said nicely, once you become an ex-governor, you can be prosecuted, and your prosecution will be in accordance with the law. You have an opportunity to defend yourself, and at the end of the day, judgment will be delivered. But you cannot have an injunction restraining a legitimate body from prosecuting you forever and ever. It should not happen. It will not happen.
At what point would you say that an agency of government is in breach of fundamental human rights in situation like this, or the EFCC at any point in time, when it involves criminal allegations of this form, has a right to swoop in any form or shape they want?
No, the EFCC doesn't have a blanket right to do whatever they like. They also must act in accordance with the law, and that is what a lot of us have always said. Otherwise, there'll be a thin line between legality and crass illegality. If you want to arrest a man, get a proper court order, a warrant of arrest, approach him, knock at his door, demonstrate that he has, there's a warrant to arrest him, and take him. And even in doing so, you must treat him with humaneness, you must treat him with honor and dignity. But what we find a lot of the times is that people are treated as if they have been prosecuted and found guilty. That cannot be right. The EFCC, under its new management, must have a meeting with its agents, with the members of its staff, and tell them that however difficult it may be to apprehend a suspect, you must go through the whole gamut of the law. I was discussing this on the platform with a colleague of mine who said that the siege on the house of the gentleman was wrong. I said yes, but it's not my responsibility to determine what is right or wrong for the EFCC. If a man's rights have been wrong, they would have a right to go to court to challenge the way the EFCC has acted.
So let's look at a few more things now on this particular issue. Now we understand that the incumbent governor, his successor, had coming to perhaps show solidarity with him. He received chairs and all of that. I don't know whether he's still at the home of his predecessor or not. Given the premise you've laid as to the EFCC having a right to do their job, now they are at the entrance of his house, they can't enter, but the governor can enter and see his quote-unquote former boss or his predecessor. Why can't the EFCC effect the arrest if the governor can enter? What is holding the EFCC back?
Well, I do not know what papers the EFCC has right now. I don't know if anything has been signed. But really and truly, they have the right to go into a house if they believe that on that premises there's a man for whom they have a warrant of arrest. And I do not see what is stopping them, except of course they believe that there could be a further breach of peace, and we do not want that to happen. So I think it's a good thing for them to act in accordance with the law and with decorum, and without necessarily being shy of their responsibility as enshrined under the law.
So what options are they left with right now? Because we've seen some of these things play out. I'm talking about the EFCC. We've seen the Okorocha incident in the past and a couple of other incidents. What options is left for them? Because you had mentioned something like if they notice or they perceive that this may spiral out of control and they don't want to bring some level of unrest, what options are available to them?
Well, I'm not a security agent.
Under the law.
Under the law, I believe they have the right to use reasonable force to go in there and apprehend a man in respect of whom they have warrant of arrest.
So, on the issue of this, let's dwell a bit on this issue of conflict of courts when it comes to incidents like this. We've seen this. I think I've spoken with you on this before. How can this be addressed so that we have a streamlined situation? Because when this case was brought, I guess, to the State High Court, they understood the enormity of the situation. I'm sure with all sense of respect to their learned judges and all of them, they understood what was involved, but they still presided over this issue. How can we begin to check some of these things so that we don't have this back and forth of counter court orders?
With all sense of modesty, I believe that anyone who has gone through some legal training would know at what point in time his authority is being exceeded, whether as a legal practitioner or as a judge. If a matter is brought before a judge, what he needs to look at are two major things: the parties and the subject matter in the claim brought before him. If the High Court judge saw that the EFCC was a defendant, he simply should have told the parties that I will not be able to handle this matter, take it to the Federal High Court. But then again, the defendant, the claimant in this situation, Mr. Yahaya Bello, was a governor only until, in the manner of speaking, yesterday. So, you understand what I mean by that. So the judge probably felt he had a responsibility to him. It's not right. We should not allow jurisprudence to go to the dogs. We know when have no authority. The constitution is very clear. A federal government agency can only be sued at the Federal High Court. Even in matters relating to land, where the federal statute, the Land Use Act, says for matters relating to land, the State High Court has jurisdiction. When you look at vis-a-vis the Constitution, which gives the Federal High Court the authority to take matters relating to federal government and its agencies, you know that the State High Court at that point in time must yield authority and jurisdiction to the Federal High Court. So we should, as lawyers, whether sitting advocate or not, and as judges also, look at these matters carefully, so that we do not act as though we're ignorant of these things. It's just not right. That's my opinion. And I think we should, as lawyers, speak to each other frontally and agree that when these things face us, we should simply tell the client, no matter how much you're going to pay to me, I should not bring the jurisdiction of the courts and the judiciary as a whole to ridicule. That's my view.
I do not intend to bring you into the politics of things, but I will walk around the fine lines of it, as well as I do not want to bring you into issues that are subject to adjudication. You're a senior lawyer, so you know this better than I do. But in this particular instance where this standoff is still on as we speak, I haven't gotten any update as to whether or not they've been able to arrest him. I'm looking at my phone, walking the phones, my tablet to see whether there's an update on that. But while this is going on, Who intervenes in a situation like this? There are court orders and EFCC waiting, maybe worried over what could happen in terms of breakdown of law and order. Who intervenes? Or these standoffs can be there as long as it can remain?
As I said earlier, I think the EFCC is merely trying its best to achieve its legal end, without having a breakdown of law and order. There are several people who are out there who are supporters of Yahaya Bello, but still, the law still has to be obeyed. If there is a subsisting order of the court that has the jurisdiction to grant that order to arrest Mr. Yahaya Bello, and I still believe that the EFCC has the right to use reasonable force to arrest him. So we cannot wait ad infinitum. Mr. Yahaya Bello, if there's an order of the court saying that he should be apprehended, a warrant of arrest, properly signed by High Court judge, the EFCC has the authority to use reasonable force. But then again, we would then say that, on the other hand, there is a judgment of the State High Court. Should we disregard that until when a judgment has been set aside by a competent court of appeal? We really must still obey. So there, in our faces, we have two conflicting orders. What should we do? Honestly, if you ask me, at some point in time or the other, those who have participated wrongly must also be brought to book. I say no more.
All right, on the final note, before I let you go, we've seen instances of these cases. I'm just tempted to ask, what can we do in terms of our laws? Because sometimes attention is so much on the federal government, we forget that there are subnationals. And some people have said that there is allegedly more corruption at the subnationals than even at the federal level. But because everybody's looking at the president and his cabinet, we get lost in that whole cycle. What can we do in terms of legislation to begin to curb some level of, I don't know, some of these corrupt practices allegedly that happens? Because it's mind-boggling when you see the presentation of anti-graft agencies. Some have been successful in putting some of them in jail, others have not been, most have not been successful. It feels like legislation is just not enough to curb bad behavior. Allegedly, I must add that line. On a final note.
I'll say this. You can have the very best of laws, you can have the best of statutes governing you, you can have the best of constitutional provisions. If those of us who should work these laws and these constitutions not put our mind and our soul to getting them properly worked, it will just go to nothing. Let us take, for example, the abuse of the Naira. We all know that the abuse of the Naira is governed by legislation. But it's only until recently that we have begun to realize that there could be consequences for the breach. So unless we all participate as citizens, as lawyers and courts in ensuring that these laws are obeyed, we'll just be making a mess of it all. But I think whoever fouls these orders or these rules or these provisions of the laws should be brought to book. We cannot continue as a nation as though we're lawless. We cannot continue to have situations where people flout laws here and they go overseas and then they're convicted. We should be able to punish misconduct and misbehavior here in our country. And let us continue as citizens to realize that we must stop at this point from allowing all things to go as we wish. We cannot continue to have business as usual. So for this, I think it's not about new laws. It's about ensuring that ensuring that those who participate in the workability of these statutes participate fully, and those who flout them are punished as provided by the law.
Mr. Delola, before you go, I know I said last question, but our correspondent is just confirming to me that the EFCC has confirmed that the former governor, Yahaya Bello, has been whisked away by his successor. It's not certain whether he will show up at the arraignment tomorrow or if there will be any arraignment. So this is the latest information I'm getting. from our correspondent saying the EFCC has confirmed that the former governor has been whisked away by his successor, Usman Ododo. So those are the stories we're guessing, but we will get clarity to some of this. But I must thank you for bringing your insight and your thoughts. We had to walk around the fine lines of the law so that we don't talk about things that will be charged for contempt of court in any form or shape. But thank you for guiding me through this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jack.